The first thing that hits you is the sheer, overwhelming scale of the color blue. You are standing in the center of Isfahan in the year 1629, under the blindingly bright sun of the Iranian plateau. Before you stretches the Naqshi Jahan Square, a massive rectangular sand of packed earth so vast it could comfortably hold several European cathedrals. But it is not the size that takes your breath away. It is the blinding, iridescent turquoise of the Shah Mosque rising into the cloudless sky. Millions of hand-painted ceramic tiles catch the light, shifting from deep lapis lazuli to a shimmering cyan as you walk past. Close your eyes, and the air is thick with the scent of roasted mutton, sweet rosewater, and the sharp, metallic tang of hot brass. The ground vibrates beneath your feet. A thundering wave of hooves rushes past as aristocratic horsemen swing wooden mallets, playing a fast, violent game of polo right in the middle of the city center. The crowd roars a dense, shoulder-to-shoulder sea of silk turbans and leather boots. You hear a dizzying symphony of languages, Persian merchants negotiating loudly, Armenian silk traders shouting over the din, Portuguese diplomats murmuring in the shade, and Indian bankers clinking silver coins. If you stand in this exact same spot today, more than 400 years later, the majestic blue domes still pierce the skyline. The scale of the square remains unbroken, a pristine heritage site frozen in time. But walk just 2 blocks outward, and the illusion shatters. The rhythmic hammering of 17th century coppersmiths is replaced by the relentless, droning horn honking of modern Iranian traffic. The air, once scented with saffron and desert dust, now carries the heavy, acrid smell of vehicle exhaust. Today's Isfahan is a sprawling metropolis of 2 million people, choked by smog and winged by industrial steel mills. Motorbikes weave aggressively through gridlocked asphalt avenues that have paved over the ancient royal gardens. But in 1629, Isfahan is the absolute center of the world. It is the glittering jewel crown of the Safavid Empire, experiencing a golden age of unprecedented wealth. As you push your way out of the blazing sun and step into the cavernous, shaded arches of the Grand Bazaar, the temperature plummets. Shafts of golden sunlight pierce through the domed brick ceilings, illuminating thick clouds of incense and dust. The bazaar stretches for thousands, a labyrinthine artery of commerce where a person could walk for an hour and never see the open sky. Every alleyway is fiercely organized by trade. In one corridor, dozens of looms clack rhythmically as weavers craft carpets so dense they will take years to finish. In the next, the deafening strike of hammers on copper echoes off the brick walls as artisans shape massive cooking pots. The air here is heavy, humid, with the breath of thousands of shoppers packed into the narrow, vaulted walkways. You weave around heavily burdened camels, led directly through the pedestrian crowds, their saddlebags bulging with raw silk from the northern provinces and spices from the Indian Ocean. Look up from the market streets, and you see the Ali Kapu palace looming over the western side of the square. It is 6 stories high, an architectural titan in an era when most European homes are still made of timber and thatch. From his elevated wooden terrace, the Shah of Iran looks down upon his creation. He has forced this magnificent city into existence, bending rivers and relocating entire populations to turn a modest desert oasis into a thriving global capital. But how did a city so isolated, surrounded by hundreds of thousands of unforgiving desert and jagged mountains, become a place where half the world's wealth seemed to flow? And more importantly, how did this bustling, cosmopolitan utopia city that housed nearly 1 million souls at its peak unknowingly set the stage for its own horrific starvation and collapse just a few generations later? The answers lie deep within the grinding daily routines of the people who built it. To understand why this staggering wealth exists in the middle of a sun-baked plateau, we have to look at the man who willed it into being, Shah Abbas the Great. It is the early 17th century, and the Safavid Empire stretches from the Tigris River in the west to the rugged edges of the Mughal Empire in India. But decades earlier, the empire was in crisis, constantly threatened by the artillery and massive armies of the rival Ottoman Empire to the west. Shah Abbas made a radical strategic decision in 1598. He moved his capital deep into the Iranian interior, far from the vulnerable borders, to an ancient but quiet oasis town. Within a single generation, he transformed that quiet town into a heavily centralized, thriving global metropolis. By 1629, the population of Isfahan has swelled to roughly 1 million people. To put that into perspective, it is vastly larger, cleaner, and more organized than London or Paris at the exact same time. The sheer scale of the city birthed a famous Persian proverb that is still spoken today: Isfahan Nesfi Jahan. Isfahan is half the world. To organize this massive influx of people, the Shah commissioned the Chahar Bagh, an astonishing, tree-lined avenue stretching for thousands, featuring cascading water channels, terraced pavilions, and thousands of blooming rose bushes. It was a masterpiece of urban planning. If you walk down Chahar Bagh Avenue today, the grand leafy promenade still exists, heavily shaded by towering centuries-old plane trees. But the serene trickle of water in the central canals is now frequently drowned out by the roar of motorcycles and the energetic chatter of teenagers clutching smartphones. The surrounding royal gardens, once reserved exclusively for Safavid nobility and visiting European ambassadors, have long been swallowed by modern apartment blocks, concrete parking garages, and neon-lit storefronts. Yet, the geographical spine of the city remains exactly where Shah Abbas laid it down over 4 centuries ago. Moving south along this great avenue, you eventually reach the lifeblood of the city, the Zayandeh River. In 1629, this river is wide, fast and freezing, fed continuously by the melting snows of the towering Zagros Mountains. To connect his new administrative capital to the southern banks, the Shah constructed monumental stone bridges. The most famous is the Coc Paul, or the Bridge of 33 Arches. But this is not merely a crossing for horses and carts. It is a massive stone dam, an engineering marvel, and a bustling public pavilion all rolled into one. Picture the bridge at twilight during the Safavid Golden Age. Thousands of torches and oil lamps flicker under the deep stone arches, casting dancing reflections on the rushing water. The river crashes violently through the sluice gates below, sending a cool mist up into the dry evening air. Men sit on intricately woven Persian rugs spread across the stone alcoves, smoking fruit-scented water pipes and drinking hot, dark tea. They shout over the roar of the river, a vibrant social mixing of court elites, weary caravan drivers, and the wealthy Armenian merchants whom the Shah forcibly relocated here to manage his highly lucrative global silk monopoly. Today, the Coc Paul still stands as one of the most iconic pieces of architecture in the Middle East. As night falls, modern locals still gather under their illuminated stone arches to sing melancholy folk songs, a tradition passed down through generations. But look down into the riverbed from the stone ledges today, and you will often see only cracked, baked mud. Modern agricultural demands, explosive population growth, and shifting climate patterns have drained the once mighty Zayandeh River. The physical lifeblood of the Safavid capital now runs completely dry for most of the year, providing a stark, tragic contrast to the roaring, life-giving waters of its 17th century golden age. Dawn breaks over the Zagros Mountains, and the city of Isfahan stirs to life before the sun even breaches the horizon. The deep, resonant call to prayer echoes from hundreds of turquoise minarets, cutting through the crisp morning air. If you are an ordinary Persian citizen in 1629, your day begins inside an inward-facing courtyard home. From the narrow, dusty alleyway outside, your house looks like nothing more than a blank, windowless mud brick wall. But step through the heavy wooden door, and you enter a private sanctuary. A small, shallow pool of water reflects the sky, flanked by a few carefully tended pomegranate trees. The family sleeps on woven wool rugs, rolling up their bedding each morning. Today, those quiet, hidden courtyards have largely been demolished. Modern Isfahan is a city of concrete apartment blocks and glass balconies that face aggressively outward. Toward the noisy streets, the intimate privacy of the 17th century has been traded for the dense, vertical living of the 21st. Leaving your courtyard in 1629, you step into a labyrinth of unpaved, winding residential alleys. The ground is dry and dusty, swept clean by the morning winds. Sanitation here is surprisingly advanced for the era. Unlike the open sewers of contemporary European capitals, Isfahan relies on an ancient, ingenious system of underground aqueducts called qanats, which bring fresh, freezing mountain water directly into the city's public baths and private cisterns. Before heading to work, you might visit the local hammam. Here, beneath steamy, vaulted brick ceilings, men and women in separate shifts scrub themselves with coarse goat hair mitts. It is the great social equalizer of the empire, where wealthy silk merchants and poor laborers sit in the humid air, gossiping and discussing local trade. By mid-morning, the temperature is rising, and you make your way toward the commercial heart of the city. You pass by a massive caravanserai, the 17th century equivalent of a combined motel and warehouse. The stench of camel dung and unwashed bodies hits you like a wall. A massive trading caravan has just arrived from India, a grueling, dangerous journey that took 3 months, moving at a sluggish pace of 15 miles a day across the mountains. Porters shout in a dozen languages, unloading bales of raw silk, Indian spices, and Chinese porcelain. Inside the covered bazaar, the workday is brutal and long. A master weaver or coppersmith will sit cross-legged in his cramped, dimly lit stall for 12 hours a day. He might earn a handful of silver abbasis a month, just enough to keep his family fed and clothed, with little left for the luxuries paraded by the court elites. By noon, the intense heat of the Iranian plateau drives the city into the shade, and the air fills with the intoxicating smell of lunch. Street vendors fan the smoke, rising from long, iron skewers of minced mutton grilling over open charcoal. You hand the vendor a single copper dinar and receive a blister-hot sheet of sangak, a massive, dimpled flatbread baked on red-hot pebbles wrapped around the sizzling meat, paired with a handful of fresh mint, radishes, and salty white cheese. This is the daily fuel of the working class. If you walk those same streets today, the scent of grilling lamb still drifts through the alleys. But now, traditional kebab stands are sandwiched between glowing neon signs advertising modern fast food, burgers, and sugary, carbonated sodas. The slow, artisanal rhythm of the 17th century craftsman has been replaced by the frantic pace of the modern gig economy, where delivery drivers on cheap motorbikes weave through the traffic, racing against the clock as the sun dips below. The horizon in 1629, the heavy wooden gates of the city and the bazaar are locked shut. The massive oil lamps are extinguished. The threat of fire in these dense, timber-roofed markets is a constant, terrifying risk. The city plunges into a profound, starry darkness, guarded only by the Shah's roaming night watchmen, whose swift and brutal justice keeps the crime rate notoriously low. Life is dictated entirely by the sun and the seasons, a stark contrast to the relentless, electrified hum of the modern metropolis that never truly sleeps. Fast forward nearly a century from the dizzying heights of the Safavid Golden Age. The year is 1722, and the impenetrable illusion of Isfahan's invincibility is about to shatter. The forces shaping the city have quietly, but violently, shifted. Global trade is rerouting. The bustling caravanserais, once deafening with the sounds of international merchants, are growing quieter. European maritime powers, the Dutch and British East India companies, are bypassing the grueling overland Silk Road, sailing their heavily armed galleons directly to India and China. The massive river of silver that founded the city's turquoise mosques begins to dry up. Yet the later Safavid rulers, isolated behind the towering brick walls of their palace complexes, continue to live in unimaginable luxury, entirely blind to the economic decay and the storm brewing in the east. That storm does not come from a rival empire, but from within their own borders. A rebellion of fierce, battle-hardened Afghan tribesmen sweeps across the eastern deserts. They are vastly outnumbered, equipped with little more than light cavalry and sheer despair, yet they march relentlessly toward the glittering capital. The Persian army, once the undisputed terror of the Middle East, has grown bloated, corrupt, and undisciplined. In March 1722, they ride out to meet the rebels at the Battle of Golnabad, just thousands from the city. In a matter of hours, the heavily armored Persian forces are completely outmaneuvered and crushed. The Afghan forces know they cannot breach the massive, fortified walls of Isfahan, so they do something far more devastating. They encircle it. They cut off the vital trade roads. They block the agricultural lifelines. Imagine being an ordinary citizen in this sprawling metropolis. You are trapped inside a city of nearly 1 million people, surrounded by hostile forces and an unforgiving desert. The vibrant, chaotic bazaars, once overflowing with exotic spices and raw silk, are suddenly paralyzed. The price of a single loaf of flatbread skyrockets in a matter of days, until only the wealthiest elites can afford to eat. The reality of the siege quickly becomes apocalyptic. Within months, the sensory overload of the bustling capital turns into a waking nightmare. The rhythmic hammering of the coppersmiths is replaced by the eerie, hollow silence of starvation. The magnificent Shahrbagh Avenue, the leafy, cascading promenade that was the pride of the empire, is completely destroyed. Desperate citizens brutally hack down the centuries-old plane trees, burning the green wood just to survive the freezing desert nights. When the grain silos empty, the citizens consume the city's horses and camels. Soon, the street dogs and stray cats disappear. As the bitter winter sets in, people are reduced to boiling old leather shoes and tree bark. Contemporary diaries record unimaginable horrors. The streets and pristine public squares become littered with bodies that no one has the strength to bury. In the darkest final weeks of the siege, maddened by hunger, some citizens resort to cannibalism. The city simply suffocates under the immense weight of its own massive population. In October 1722, the Safavid Shah finally rides out of the starving city. Dressed in mourning clothes, he walks through the corpse-lined streets to surrender his crown and his empire to the Afghan warlord. The consequences are absolute. The population of Isfahan plummets from 1 million to barely 100,000. Palaces are looted, royal archives are burned, and the golden age is violently extinguished. Walk through Isfahan today, and the profound trauma of 1722 is completely invisible to the untrained eye. You can stroll into a brightly lit hypermarket, filled with imported goods, fresh produce grown in massive modern greenhouses, and overflowing bins of rice. The city is a fortress of modern food security. Yet the geography that made the 1722 siege so devastatingly effective, the isolating ring of jagged mountains and the harsh, arid plains remains identical. Modern Isfahan survives not just on the waters of the Zayandeh River, but on a fragile, complex network of diesel trucks and paved highways that pierce those same mountains. A quiet reminder of how easily the vital arteries of a great city can be severed. If you stand today in the center of Nakshi Jahan Square, you are standing inside a perfectly preserved architectural ghost. The towering blue-tiled domes of the Shah Mosque and the imposing wooden balconies of the Ali Kapu Palace look almost exactly as they did in 1629. It is a stunning, open-air time capsule. But this pristine square is an illusion, a highly protected island floating in a vast, chaotic sea of modern development. To truly understand the transformation of Isfahan, you must walk out of the ancient gates and into the relentless grid of the 21st century dot in the 17th century. The area immediately surrounding the royal square was a paradise of sprawling, interconnected gardens. The Safavid Shahs designed Isfahan to be a city of gardens, with lush estates, fruit orchards, and exquisite private pavilions stretching for thousands toward the Zayende River. Today, almost all of that green canopy has disappeared. As the Safavid dynasty collapsed in the 18th century and power eventually shifted north to Tehran, Isfahan fell into a long period of neglect. When rapid industrialization and population booms hit Iran in the mid-20th century, those abandoned royal gardens were bulldozed. They were replaced by the dense, gray concrete apartment blocks, asphalt intersections, and bustling commercial storefronts that house today's 2 million residents. The city grew upward and outward, swallowing the delicate medieval footprint. The geography that made Isfahan a perfect 17th century sanctuary now serves as its greatest modern challenge. The city sits on a dry plateau ringed by the imposing peaks of the Zagros Mountains. In 1629, this geography was a shield. It kept the city isolated from the Ottoman artillery to the west and forced global trade caravans to funnel through easily taxable mountain passes. The air was remarkably clear, swept clean by desert winds. But today, those same mountains form a topographical trap. Modern Isfahan is one of Iran's most heavily industrialized hubs, ringed by massive steel mills, petrochemical plants, and oil refineries. The jagged peaks of the Zagros block the wind, trapping the heavy, acrid smog generated by millions of vehicles and factories directly over the city. The brilliant, cloudless blue skies that once illuminated the turquoise mosques are now frequently choked with a thick, gray haze. The environment has been fundamentally altered by the demands of the modern era. Nowhere is this transformation more visually striking than at the river. Walk down to the Kayu Bridge, another masterpiece of Safavid stone engineering. In the historical era, this bridge was a functioning dam. The Shah would sit in the central stone pavilion, watching the roaring, freezing water of the Zayende River crash through the sluice gates, surrounded by lush gardens and wealthy courtiers. The river was the literal and spiritual lifeblood of the metropolis, powering watermills and irrigating the vast orchards. Today, you can still walk across the grand stone arches of the Kayu Bridge, but when you look down, you are likely to see completely dry, cracked earth. The explosion of modern agriculture, the insatiable thirst of the surrounding industrial complexes, and shifting climate patterns have strangled the Zayende River. The water is diverted long before it ever reaches the city limits. The historical bridges now span a ghost river, serving as poignant monuments to a forgotten ecosystem. Yet, despite the smog, the concrete, and the dry riverbeds, the soul of the city persists. The transformation of Isfahan from a garden-filled imperial capital to an industrial powerhouse is not just a story of loss. It is a testament to the sheer survival of a city that was starved, besieged, and stripped of its political power, only to rebuild itself century after century within the confines of its unforgiving landscape. The dawn of the 20th century found the Persian lion trapped between two encroaching giants, the Russian bear and the British whale. By the time the Qajar dynasty withered away, Iran's military was a shadow of its former self, its borders carved by treaties and its sovereignty sold for oil. We see the initial transformation under the Pahlavis, a desperate, rapid westernization. We watch the desert sands being paved over by modern airfields and the traditional cavalry replaced by American-made Phantoms and British chieftain tanks. For a moment, in the 1970s, Iran is the gendarme of the Persian Gulf, a shimmering, high-tech fortress. But the foundation is brittle. The wealth is a golden mask hiding a soul that feels disconnected from its own soil. Then, everything changes. The 1979 revolution shatters the Western alliance, and in 1980, the ultimate conflict arrives, the Iran-Iraq War. We see Saddam Hussein's armored divisions rolling across the border, expecting a swift collapse of a chaotic revolutionary state. What follows is the most brutal, prolonged industrial war of the late 20th century. We watch the sacred defense, a return to the ancient Persian concept of total national survival. The contrast is harrowing. High-tech jet dogfights in the clouds above, while on the ground, thousands of young volunteers engage in human wave attacks through Iraqi minefields, carrying plastic keys to paradise. This is the emotional climax. A generation sacrificing itself in the mud of Khuzestan, reviving the fanatical spirit of the Safavid Kizilbash. The defining moral moment occurs as chemical weapons choke the trenches. Iran faces a choice: retaliate in kind or maintain its ideological principles. In a shocking fact, despite being the victim of the largest chemical attacks since World War I, Iran refuses to deploy its own chemical stockpile, citing religious prohibitions. The war ends in a bloody stalemate, having cost 1 million lives, but it achieves something unexpected. It forges a new, self-reliant military identity. We see the birth of a fortress of faith, a nation that learns to build its own missiles, drones and asymmetric tactics, because the world refused to sell them a single spare part. Suddenly, we shift to the modern day. We see the underground missile cities, carved into the Zagros Mountains' vast, neon-lit labyrinths filled with precision-guided rockets. This is the evolution of the Persian archer, no longer firing wooden shafts, but ballistic missiles that can reach across continents. We observe the axis of resistance, a modern version of the old Persian satrapies, where influence is projected through proxy forces and hybrid warfare from the Levant to the Bab el-Mandeb. The sense of scale is no longer about occupying territory, but about creating a zone of influence that deters even the world's current superpowers. We connect this past to the modern identity of the city of Tehran. We watch the murals of martyrs on the high-rise buildings, their eyes reflecting the same stoic determination as the stone immortals of Persepolis. The history of Iran is not a straight line, it is a spiral. Every collapse is followed by a reconstruction, every invasion by an assimilation. We see that the modern Iranian soldier, standing guard at a nuclear facility or a naval base, is the direct descendant of the cataphract and the archer. They carry the weight of 5,000 years of imperial war in their marrow. The story ends with a powerful circle conclusion. We see a drone flying over the ruins of Ctesiphon, then over the modern skyline of Tehran, and finally over the tomb of Cyrus the Great. The message is clear. Empires rise and fall, religions change, and borders shift, but the Persian lion never sleeps for long. It remains a fortress of faith, a land that has mastered the art of survival through the fire of history. If you found this journey through 5,000 years of war fascinating, like and subscribe to join us for our next deep dive into history. Which empire should we cover next? Let us know in the comments.